Cuba, it's me, episode 75 of The W.I.L.L.I.W Show, which stands for Wrestling is Life, Life is Wrestling. And today on my episode, I want to take it back to the old days, before I was an actual wrestler, where I just dreamed of being a wrestler. And yes, wrestling was life, life was wrestling. It all goes back. So I lived in Campbell River, British Columbia, and I lived way out of town on Gordon Road. And there was only like 4 or 5 other kids there to play with. And I always wanted to wrestle. I used to make these tapes of, like, I would press record on the tape deck, and I would make up my own fake federation, and I would do play-by-play and make up these guys and, like, basically just announce my whole show with all these guys I made up, all the stats, all the titles, everything. And then my mom took some of my old clothes, and she sewed them all together and, like, sewed a toque on for the head, and we stuffed them full of plastic bags. Before, it was 5 cents a bag. And we stuffed them so they were like bendy, but you would do a move to them and then they would bend back to place. And they were like almost my height, because it was like my older clothes that I had just grown out of. So then I would lay a mattress down in the toy room, and I would do moves and stuff like that. And a couple of times I did a superplex off the couch onto the mattress, and my dad would get mad at me because I was smashing the floor too hard. And so I would do this kind of stuff. And then I heard about trampolines. So, I would go and collect cans, like, where we lived, it was probably like a pretty far walk, actually, like a half an hour walk or 10-minute bike ride down by the highway, and all the loggers that would go to work would throw their beer cans out of the trucks. So I would collect these bags of cans, and then I would go to Overweighty grocery store, and they had this thing where you had to put each can in individually, and it would crush the can. And then after however many cans you put in, it would print you out a receipt, and you could take it up to the cashier, and she'd give you the cash. So my mom made me a deal that if I saved up for half of a trampoline, she would pay the other half. So I was thrilled. I just kept saving, and luckily there was a lot of parties and barbecues that went on Gordon Road, so I got the cans, and I got a trampoline. Now, I also used to love baseball. My dad built me. We had like a big 6-acre place. He built me an actual wooden backstop for baseball. So it was like the 2 sides and then the back. So I pushed a trampoline into there, like right over top of home plate. So it was like half a cage. So I could climb up the cage and do moves onto the wrestling dummies on the trampoline. And it was awesome. And then we got a video camera. And it was one of these ones where you take the little tape and put it in, and then you could take it and put it inside a big VCR tape, and it would expand, and you could watch it in the VCR. And in grade 7, I met Aaron Kern, and we used to always do these Royal Rumbles. Like, he had this house too, and we would just do it on this little hallway patch of carpet. So we would write 30 names, and we'd put them all in a hat, and then we would take turns, and we'd pick one, and then we'd get eliminated. If we didn't like the guy, we'd get eliminated fast. If it was someone really good, we would let them go on a streak, and then after every time we got eliminated, we'd pick a name out of the hat. And then that transferred on with Brandon Taylor and Chris Johnson and my sister Jessica. We would do Royal Rumbles all the time, and what we'd do is, so we had the trampoline pushed into the backstop, and then we'd get like these mattresses and put them outside of the ring so you could get thrown off the trampoline to be eliminated. And we used to always film them. I still have some of these on tape. And my voice was so high-pitched back then, and I would always try and do like play-by-play as we were doing the wrestling, but it was so bad to listen to. And we even like evolved and got like entrance music and stuff like that, and we'd play it on the recorder. So you'd come in and do your entrance, yeah, and then you'd have to run over to the ghetto blaster and turn off the song, and then go back in the ring or the trampoline or whatever. So like there was a lot of great times through that. And then Aaron Kern moved to Willow Point, the other side of Campbell River, and he still got to go to my school, but he made a whole bunch of new friends. And then Aaron was like, I'm making this wrestling federation. And he took it seriously. He came up with like, well, they weren't pay-per-views, but we called them pay-per-view. He came up with names. He came up with wrestlers' names. He came up with the cards. He came up with storylines. He even had a website when the internet just first started. I don't know how he got it, but it was like www.iwa.40w.com, and it had a message board and had profile pictures of us and everything. Like, we took it so seriously. Like, I remember sitting in English class writing down moves that I was going to use. We would do it every Saturday, And like sometimes I would bike like halfway across the town to go to these, and then we upsetted some people. We weren't allowed to use Brian McQuarrie's yard anymore, and then we started doing it in my yard, and my mom was starting to get mad because we put the posts in the ground and put holes in the yard and break lawn chairs and do some dangerous stuff too that she wasn't too pleased of. All of a sudden the roof started coming into play. But there were so many great memories. I even used to have this dog, Denver, and he was like half Rottweiler, half German Shepherd, and he was a big dog. And like me and Shay Roddy would go and we would stunner Denver all the time, and he was such a workhorse, and he would take it, and he would just love playing with us. And he was a big dog, and I'd like bounce him on the trampoline and try and like body slam him, but he didn't know he was a sandbagger a bit too, and he also didn't want to like get flipped and land on his back, so he'd always like try and turn. So like sometimes he would reverse it. So I used to have some epic matches with Denver, and then we also had like we called it a lake, but it was just like a huge pond, like a really big pond, and so we would sometimes have water matches in there. So some really fun times. I just always loved wrestling. I saved up a bunch of money. I used to babysit this kid named Gordon down the road when I was like 12 and he was like 5, and I saved up a bunch of money and I sent away for Pro Wrestling Weekly. Like Pro Wrestling Illustrated had a weekly newsletter that was in black and white, and it was only like the front and back and then the two sides in the middle, and it would have like rankings and like event results. And that's when I found out about other wrestling other than WWF, because I used to have no clue. Like I would go to the video store and they would have tapes, and it was like Coliseum videotapes, but they didn't have any WCW or Japan or ECW. And one time I had like a wrestling magazine, and me and Aaron Hearn found out about ECW. So I sent a money order away for this ECW tape that I got, and it took like 7 weeks, and it was like $50 plus like 30. It ended up being almost $100 for this VCR tape. And I remember after work we went down to Aaron's mom worked at the bank, and she, for some reason, I think for like training videos or something, they had a VCR in like the staff room, and we were waiting for her to get a ride for something, and that's when I first watched an ECW tape. We stuck it in, and I just remember there was a match at Too Cold Scorpio. I think it was versus Benoit. It might have been Guerrero or I think it was Benoit. And I was just blown away by some of the stuff they were doing, and that just like changed our whole views on wrestling, because we were, especially like around 1995 when WWF was doing like the Duke the Dumpster Drozy and the Mantor and like the silly characters, and then all of a sudden it was this crazy shock value. So then we were like, oh, we're gonna do some crazy stunts too, and like so we would always plan some kind of crazy stunts, or we would try and build our own tables. My dad helped me build a table one time. Like, just so much stuff, so much fun. Like, wrestling was so fun back then. It still is now, but just being a kid and having all these dreams and, like, thinking that one day you're going to do this and for a living and you're going to be rich and famous to be a wrestler. Like, it was so awesome. And, like, the other kids liked hockey, too, and baseball, too, and I did, too. But I was always pushing for wrestling. And, like, my poor sister, I would harass her and harass her. Come on. And then especially after, like, if I rented like a wrestling video and then I watched it, I was always so pumped up. And then I would like try and wrestle her, and then she would like complain and tell me to leave her alone. And then I would get like her Zeller's teddy bear and beat the heck out of that. And then she would like get upset about that, and because I just wouldn't stop. And because I used to never have cable, I had 3 channels: CBC, CTV, and Check 6. And the only show was like Wrestling Challenge was on Saturday, and it was just a bunch of job matches, and then they'd have like one mid-card match as the main event of that show. Or if something big happened, they would show like a clip of it. But so I never got to watch Raw when it started, but then I would go to visit Aaron and he would have Raw. But finally we moved from Gordon Road. It's when I was like 15 or 16 or somewhere around there. So I got cable so I could watch Raw. And it was so great. Like, oh man, I used to tape all the Raws too so I could watch them again the next day. And I would just like study them. And Stone Cold like blew my mind because he kind of bring a little bit of that ECW flavor, because WWF was so cookie cutter at the time. Then here comes Stone Cold drinking beer and swearing and going against the boss. Like, it was just like, wow, I can't believe it. And then I met Casey Enrig. and he was a pretty spoiled kid. He had like amazing satellite dish, so we could go to his house and we could like do the whole flip between Nitro and Raw thing and like watch him. And then he would always get like the pay-per-views too, and that's where I've watched my first WCW pay-per-view. Just so many great times. I love thinking about the old times of wrestling. It makes me so happy to think about those times and those people that I shared good times with, who most of them I'm still in contact with. And I hope they get to watch this video and maybe they can share memories of what we used to do wrestling as a kid and stuff like that. Because there was a lot of people that came along, maybe even just for one or two shows, and they would do some wrestling with us, like Travis Finley and like Shay. I already said him, and Nigel, and there was Tony Churchill, Eddie Osborne, Brian McQuarrie. What was his name? Like, there's so many guys that I remember. Steve Merriman, Chris Doucette. Great times. So this is episode 75 of the Willow Show, the old reminiscing one. Remember, like or you get a leg drop, comment or you get a clothesline, subscribe or you get a suplex. I'm your host, Elian Habanero. I love wrestling. Cuba!